Greetings, everyone. I'm saluting the viewers, although I'm talking now to Dr. Marius Dorobantu from Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Hello, sir.
Good evening, good morning.
Talking about different time zones. We sort of met online a few times. We had a chat a while ago, but I'm very excited to talk to you, Marius, given that your activity, your research is exciting. It's not quite my cup of tea. Before I roll the ball as usual, it is my duty to acknowledge the Garigal clan, upon whose ancestral lands I live and work. I work mostly from home. And I pay respect to their elders past and present. And may their wisdom always guide me and the locals towards an integrated view of reality and life. I know that for many viewers, including for my guest, this doesn't mean much, but it is important for the so-called advanced societies that actually build on the shoulders of giants, forgotten giants most times. It's important for us to remember how much has been lost in the process of getting civilized, and how much we can still learn from ancestral wisdom, at least in relation to integrating aspects of human culture, technology, civilization, and life in general, the environment, and so on and so forth. I believe that this is a worthwhile way of outlining the setting for our conversation, because I'm very much interested in learning from you, Marius, from your passion for studying artificial intelligence from a theological viewpoint. Okay, so I'm eager to introduce Marius, and before anything, for the benefit of the viewers, a few things about him. This is his profile, his official profile at Vrije Universiteit. He's, well, compared to me, a young researcher, but I don't want to for you to feel belittled in any way. The fact that I have invited you to this conversation shows that I actually admire your work, Marius.
I will always take young. I will never say no to young. So, thank you.
Viva la revolución! And this is his profile on the website of the prestigious International Society for Science and Religion. We are colleagues there. It's a great joy to see. Well, let me be a bit nationalist, although I'm not usually. Another Romanian featuring there. And for those of you who might doubt my brief introduction and the honesty of my statement about admiring Marius's work, well, please go to his Google Scholar profile and you'll see how much this man has already produced. Yeah, and there are a lot of other things forthcoming. For those of you who actually want to read his stuff, you can go to his academia.edu profile, where you find videos, but also papers, articles, book reviews, conference presentations, and so on and so forth. This is his latest. I'll get to it in a moment. And of course, there's his profile on ResearchGate, the same, you know, and look at his outputs here. So there are many places where you can retrieve his work, and this is the journal I co-edit, the ISCAS journal, Christian Perspectives on Science and Technology, and Marius just published here a beautiful article, Imago Dei in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Challenges and Opportunities for a Science-Engaged Theology, which is actually one of the things that determined me to invite him for this conversation, because I do believe that theology, including Orthodox theology, has a lot to do in order to engage this kind of topic, and Marius's trailblazing work already sets the parameters of the discussion. But those of the viewers who are interested in more, say, popular level outputs can also find Marius in various places. This is a 4-part article, Vulnerable Like God, Perfect Machines and Imperfect Humans. And of course, the list can continue, which is impressive. And good on you, and I'm certain that we'll hear more of you and your work in the years to come. One more thing I would like to show is the recent release of a document. Perhaps you'd like to say a few things at the later stage about it, Being Human in the Age of AI, which Marius co-authored together with a group of Vatican researchers, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before we get to some details of your work, can you say a few things about yourself, please?
Yes, thank you very much for the generous introduction. Indeed, I have a relatively recent interest in AI. I did not start by studying AI. By training, I'm a theologian. I studied theology in my home country, Romania, and I had my master's degree in the Netherlands at the Radboud University Nijmegen, where I focus most on monastic studies, the Jesus prayer, hesychasm, the renewal that is occurring nowadays at Mount Athos in Greece. So a very beautiful topic. But then I completely switched my research to science and theology, and especially AI. And I did a doctorate in Strasbourg in France on the questions raised by for theological anthropology and the notion that humans are distinctive and they are in the image of God, by a scenario of human-level artificial intelligence or artificial superintelligence. So I tried to play with that hypothesis and see what that implies for theology. And currently I am based in Amsterdam at the Vrije University, working on a project entitled Understanding Spiritual Intelligence, Psychological, Theological, and Computational Approaches. And this is very, very exciting. This is an ISSR project.
Okay, yeah. So, because I've seen, so I didn't know of the project as located at Vrije University, but I've seen it via the newsletters of ISSR, so the International Society for Science and Religion. Okay, yes. And I've seen your name there. Can you tell me and the viewers, please, a few things about the project and where are you at with your research?
Yes, so I'm the only member of the team who is based in the Netherlands. The rest most of them are in the UK. This is a very interdisciplinary project. It is occurring under a bigger initiative called Diverse Intelligences. This is a huge initiative by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, which tries to understand the notion of intelligence and maybe redefine it, the whole field of the study of intelligence in humans, in machines, in animals. And within this bigger initiative, we are one of the few projects that deal with things related to religion, spirituality, theology. We are looking at whether there is such a thing as a spiritual intelligence, which is exciting because, well, it is obvious that we deploy our cognitive abilities, our mind, in a very particular way in spiritual life. Very obviously in spiritual practices, but also in spiritual life, even in the day-to-day activities of a life that has a spiritual dimension. And there's a question there whether this is a particular type of intelligence. Is this like another intelligence in the maybe you are familiar with the taxonomy of the 9 intelligences proposed about 2 decades ago, where you have emotional, mathematical, musical, spatial, and so on. And is spiritual intelligence yet another type of intelligence, or is it computationally expressible? Could we tease out such a dimension in it? And we have theologians, very distinguished one, Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. We have psychologists, top psychologists of religion. We have philosophers. We have top computer scientists, so people who have worked almost their entire career in the field of AI. And this has led to very interesting insights on this notion of spiritual intelligence. We are quite confident there is such a thing as spiritual intelligence, although not in the sense of yet another type of intelligence, but a very different way in which the human mind is being deployed in spiritual life. And this has very much to do.
Sorry, yeah, I know there's a bit of time lag between us. Sorry to interrupt you. This is quite interesting, and now I think I can make a connection between your 2 interests. The older one on philocalic Athonite monasticism or spirituality, and this project. Because there's in at least the Greek patristic tradition, there's that concept of nous, usually translated, I think, badly as intellect. I would prefer mind, where it's actually about a state of the mind that amounts to what you call spiritual intelligence. I'm on the money here. Is it the idea, and this is where you come from, where you discuss spiritual intelligence from the noetic kind of experience?
I think you are onto something, although I think you are much more of an expert in the patristic notion of nous than I can pretend to be. You are right that my interests have coalesced into this project, because the Jesus Prayer, for example, is one of the spiritual practices we are studying closely. And I, from a theological perspective, well, the idea is the idea is to find a language. You can express the same kind of thing in various ways in the science and religion dialogue. And I think what you mentioned there is a very theological approach, which is loaded with theological assumptions. But indeed, I think if you want to also speak to a non-theological audience, you can still speak of a certain spiritual intelligence, but you have to do it in terms of the cognitive architecture and what the mind actually does, and whether there are some specific characteristics of our engagement in spiritual practices. So I think you can talk both about the nous, but you can also talk from a cognitive science perspective of the 2 minds. More or less, maybe you are aware in psychology of this dual cognitive model, which goes back to even to people like Freud or perhaps even older than that. And nowadays it has been mostly popularized in the right brain, left brain type of dynamics by Ian Gilchrist. So there's this idea that we have two main cognitive modes, one more intuitional, more fluid, more connected with our body and with reality, and one more rational, more logical, linguistic, but not so connected, focus more on itself than on connection with the outside. And we think spiritual intelligence might be located as a certain type of interaction between these two minds. Whereas if I can say it in a very simplistic way, in our society, the logical linguistic mind has a primacy, and most of the things that we do, that's the kind of intelligence we value. That's the kind of intelligence that we are trying to program in machines. Whereas in spiritual intelligence, what you see is a prioritization of this more ancient type of mind, the kind of mind that we also share with some non-human animals in a rudimentary form. And through spiritual practices, you can achieve a balance, a very healthy balance between these two types of minds. And that is where that's why many things click if you do spiritual practices right, because you are positioned in a much more healthy engagement with your own life, and it has to do with narratives, it has to do with participation, it has to do with relationality. So all these things flow from that type of engagement.
Now I can understand why you are wearing that T-shirt with the Aboriginal Australian rainbow serpent. There you have it. Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, you bit me there. Yeah, I only have a sample of this kind of integration of minds, if you like, by way of a quasi icon painted by a Greek Australian monk near Sydney in Aboriginal style. So the beautiful parable of not the parable, the miracle of the fish, multiplication of fish and loaves of bread in Aboriginal style and with some inscription in Greek. An integration of minds, of layers of our human mystery, you can call it, and an integration that doesn't leave out wisdom, you'd say, and the visceral aspect of being alive and stuff like that. That's beautiful. How does this come together with the topic of artificial intelligence? Is this the backdrop where from you get your insight into how to deal or how to treat the artificial intelligence, or what to expect of an artificial intelligence?
Yes, I think that connects very well, because if you look at AI, you can draw many conclusions about the human mind in comparison with AI and in comparison with animal intelligence. So that's where my part in this project is more or less to locate the human distinctiveness in terms of our cognitive engagement with the world in relation to what we know about AI and what we know about animal intelligence. So, for example, to me, AI is very informative because it shows us that many of the previous hypotheses about what the human mind is and what the human mind does were not very accurate. The assumptions behind the field of AI when it started in the mid-20th century, 1950s, and so were that the human mind operates in a very logical way. It does logical operations with symbols. That was the idea. They even thought that there is a sort of operating system of the mind, like a language of the mind. They called it mentalese. So that should be the language through which the mind codifies everything into symbols. And they assumed that if you that there's a finite number of symbols and relations between symbols that you can codify, and you can program that into a machine, and then the machine would think. The machine would really think like human beings.
So the idea of a computable, quantifiable, or computational rather, human mind that can be sort of replicated on the level of AI. That's the idea.
Yes, precisely. And
but is the mind
is
the mind something that is computable? I'm a fan of Roger Penrose's all the work on the mind, and when he dealt with human consciousness and artificial intelligence, or computing rather, computers. And yeah, I remember his apophatic stance that actually the mind and reality, after all, aren't reducible to some kind of strings of ones and zeros. Is this still the case in AI research?
Yes, well, I think Roger Penrose was in a sense ahead of his time. And there were some other critics of this approach in AI who pointed the flaws in this, because that's not all humans do. And this approach did not lead too far in terms of the abilities that we were able to program in computers. I think Roger Penrose, I mean, I'm sympathetic to that hypothesis, and we definitely learn from AI that the kind of mind that we more or less disregarded is perhaps much more important than we thought it is. You can see this in what is called Moravec's paradox from roboticist Hans Moravec, who concluded somewhere midway between the 1950s and today, when the failures of this classical AI were already evident. He concluded that it is much easier to program in computers the so-called high capacities of the human mind, for example, chess or proving mathematical theorems, so things that we regard as the epitome of intelligence. But it is much more difficult to program a computer to have sensory motor skills, to have vision, things that we almost take for granted. But those things are very easy for us because we have millions of years of training in perfecting them. So to us, they feel effortless, they feel mindless. We do them without thinking. But that kind of mind seems to be much more important, and it's really the iceberg that is below the sea level, and the kind of chess, math, logical language part of our intelligence is just the tip of the iceberg, and you cannot have that without the bulk. So now I think most work in AI is to see whether that bigger intelligence and more elusive is programmable in computer programs, and okay. I think the results are interesting.
Definitely. There's a question that I have come across, and I'm certain there's nothing new about it, but I'd like to hear you talking about this. At this stage of our understanding and accomplishment in the AI area, is there any possibility to see that leap of a machine that is, or an artificial mind that is programmed by us, a leap into the area of full consciousness, self-awareness, feeling, self-determination and stuff like that, is on a human level, as I read in your work, human level AI. Can we expect this? Is it something that we can prognosticate, or it can simply happen like this and we are simply unaware of it?
Yes, this is really the $1,000,000 question. I do have some, I could speculate on that if you want, because what I heard you say is actually two different things. I noticed that many people speak of human level AI, which is a machine that would do things equally well as we do them. So this would be a machine that would be indistinguishable from us. And we already have that kind of AI, but in particular tasks. For example, in chess playing, AI is already superhuman. In image recognition, sometimes AI is at the same level or even better than human experts, for example, in radiology or things like that. Now we have this, maybe you're aware of it for a week or so, maybe 10 days, this chat GPT program that generates text almost at a human level. I mean, people still find flaws in its argument, but it's almost magical. The kind of text that it is able to generate. I think many people would be fooled to think there's a human being behind the keyboard.
I ordered a book, but I'm yet to receive it, written by an AI entity and two people. Have you come across that thing? I even forgot. So a colleague told me about it, and I ordered it, and yeah, looking forward to getting it.
I think this will become more and more the case in the future, as we have in chess human-computer teams. But what I was saying is that is the human level. So you have an entity that produces human level performance, but that has nothing to do with the way it does it. So in my analysis, human level AI could be possible, perhaps. I'm not an AI expert per se, so I'm just looking at AI from the outside as an external observer. But looking at the progress that AI made in the recent decades, and especially in the past few years, I could totally see an AI passing the so-called Turing test, which is a test where it could pass as human.
Yeah.
But what I do see is that AI does things very differently from how we do them. So it has a completely different methodology. Even when it generates the kind of text that it generates, it's not because it knows something. It's because it makes very smart statistical associations between words. So you feed a word and it immediately creates a map, and it imagines what kind of words are in its vicinity and so on. And apparently, with that kind of statistical methods, you could produce human level performance. But on the inside, if you want, that says nothing about the machine. Whether a machine could become consciousness, to me, is a completely different question of whether it will become human level intelligent.
Oh, really?
And to that, we are almost nowhere with that question, because we don't understand how consciousness emerges in humans in the first place. We don't understand actually how consciousness emerges from inert matter. So this is sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness. So this is still one of the, maybe perhaps the biggest mystery in science, and it's not even clear whether science has the tools to investigate consciousness. So we don't know when the spark lights into something that it becomes a self. And for all purposes, actually, it will be probably impossible to test it, because you could never. There's a famous essay in philosophy. It's called. It's about how you cannot know what it's like to be a bat. So you can never understand how a different creature perceives reality, especially one that has different senses. You can never understand how another human perceives reality, but there is a kinship there. So you can imagine, I mean, I look at you, you look more or less like me in many ways. So I can imagine that the kind of concerns that I have, the kind of pains that I have, the kind of pleasures that I have, I imagine that we share them, and then we construct this shared reality based, but this is actually a leap of faith. I can never be completely sure that you are not a zombie, if I may use this
Well, yeah,
example.
well,
So
it's difficult to ascertain.
yes, so
So
you can
I
never,
keep pouring coffee.
yes, yes, exactly. But you can always look from the outside. You can never go inside and take another creature's perspective. So with AI, if it behaved human, and if especially if it started to tell tricky things. I mean, we had this a few months ago when a Google engineer actually started to claim that the program he was working with had become sentient, and because funny enough, the program has started to talk about God, about existential concerns, about the fear of death, about being a spiritual person. So all these clues led the engineer to conclude the AI was sentient, which, well, there was a huge debate. Probably it wasn't. But this begs the question, how would we even know unless on a basis of trust?
Mm. And I assume we have, as you said at some point, we have to put in place some tests for what you called earlier spiritual intelligence. And I'm eager to see the outcomes of your group's research, because that's tremendously important. I believe that, for example, coming from a very different perspective, that what we usually call natural theology, a theology that busies itself with proving the existence of God by way of reasoning, you know. And in all honesty, I'm very prudent in regard to this kind of approach, because apart from some exceptions with people who actually make a splash, managing to convince someone rationally, in reality, nowadays, we are a proof-based society, a proof-based culture, and people tend to believe that only things that can be proved are true and worth pursuing. And one of the things, from my viewpoint, in regard to providing the proof of God, a proof of God that is compelling, should have as a starting point the experiences of the saints, that kind of spiritual intelligence that you mentioned earlier, where you see the human phenomenon associated with stuff that otherwise doesn't happen. But it does happen, and it's a recurring experience in history. Yeah, we have so many accounts of witnesses about extraordinary happenings, occurrences around the saints. And I know many people well, try to dismiss this as hagiography, but since it's an account that appears again and again and again and again in history, this means we are facing a phenomenon that it's worth considering, worth analyzing. And I wonder to what extent, if we ever manage to put in place a test to measure this kind of experience, to what extent this can be also extrapolated for testing artificial intelligence. And this will lead us, of course, into fields like metaphysics and theology and so on and so forth. And of course, this is what somehow you already do, isn't it?
Yes, well, I take your point about saints. I'm not so certain you could design I mean, this thing seems to elude empirical testing. And I think you can always add caveats, and people will always say, well, maybe it was even when you have a group experience something, you have this collective hallucination. So there are psychology comes with all kinds of explanations that could, in the end, I think it's a matter of faith, whether you want to interpret something as a miracle or you want to interpret it as just an oddity of how our mind works and so on. And the same happens
I'm
with
talking about something completely different. Sorry to interrupt you again. I'm talking about physical transformations that occur on the level of someone who has a saintly experience or the experience of holiness, and those are things that are palpable. They are elusive in that usually the saints that get to that state don't actually show off, and we know that they prefer to stay hidden for perhaps they don't want to become lab rats. But because this is an experience that recurs in history, there's a phenomenology that can be established, and to an extent, I think it has been done quite successfully from the viewpoint of, say, patristic studies to an extent, you know. But there's still yet to be considered seriously as an object of examination, of research from interdisciplinary groups like the one that you are working with.
Yes, I think there are other things, for example, like near-death experiences, which are also they come to something similar, or miraculous healings. So these things are sometimes at the fringe of scientific research. Perhaps unfortunately, I think there are also many people who are a bit too uncritical for these things. So I think empirical research here has to be really, really careful in discerning. And sometimes people are not lying, but sometimes people believe things. Well, let's leave it at that. But I think you are right, and I agree that this would be a very interesting, if you could have access. I mean, it would be a neuroscientist's dream to have access. They did try to for example, with some experienced monastics. They place them in a lab setting, and they ask them to meditate or to pray to see whether some region in the brain activates. But of course, that has nothing to do with how things happen in natural settings. So maybe the control of all things ruins it. But you mentioned their natural theology, and I think AI could function in a sense like that, not to prove the existence of God, but just in the sense that you can learn about God and about the nature of reality from the so-called book of nature. So you look around and you draw some meaningful conclusions about the existence of a creator, maybe the creator's purposes. Then you have evolutionary theory, and now you know the universe is much bigger in time and space, and you know that God enacts creation in a very sophisticated way, albeit perhaps natural. I mean, or depending how you interpret that. And I think that also feeds into your theology, and you can learn something there, and you can refine perhaps some theories in your theology. Some are more plausible than others in respect to kind of all kinds of developments. And now you have AI, which I think is another new thing in the world, if you want. And then you could use it as a litmus test for some theological theories, or you can look at AI and perhaps try to tease out something in theological anthropology. So you look at AI as this artificial other, and then you look at sort of a mirror for who we are, and you can look at AI and see what we are not, in a sense. As I was mentioning, that we learned from AI that our cognition is not that rational as we used to think. But you can also look at AI, as it happens nowadays, as AI is a sort of aggregation of our collective beliefs and and even collective intelligence, if you think that current algorithms, including the one I mentioned about text generation, are being trained on millions of samples of human text, sometimes from Wikipedia or from Reddit, but sometimes even from our email communication, depending who is proprietary and what kind of data they have access to. But most of the time, whatever we do on the internet, we contribute to training these algorithms. So in a way, when AI shows a kind of bias against certain genders or against certain races, or if you ask, now you have these generative models that can draw things based on prompts. So you just ask them, draw me a doctor, and they draw a male doctor, a male white doctor, right? Or a theologian, and they draw a male theologian with a beard, looks very much like you. So then what you see there is a reflection of what in our society is the majority idea of that. Yeah. So that's one way to interrogate our own blind spots and biases, and to see, well, perhaps we should do something in that respect. So that's why I'm very excited about AI and all kinds of opportunities. And I mentioned a few in the article that you indicated in the beginning, the kind of opportunities that are there for theological reflection about this new thing. I like to compare it with finding extraterrestrial intelligence, because that would also open a whole set of questions and perhaps make us rethink some of our assumptions in eschatology, in Christology, in anthropology, not necessarily blowing everything off, right? But just becoming a new data to feed into our theological reflection. And to the same extent, I think AI could inform theological anthropology.
That's very interesting. I was just browsing your contribution to the Vatican document, which actually touches on what you were just mentioning a moment ago. It seems that it's not only the matter of learning from the AI about ourselves. You are talking about this, including a matter of flourishing in this age, you know. You seem to also mention some challenges that we people feel, especially people of faith, I would say, when we contemplate the possibility of AI or the idea of an artificial intelligence that can control us, that can decide for us, and so on and so forth. And my mind usually goes straight to Arthur C. Clarke's AI that rules everything in the immortal city, diaspora or diaspora, whatever is pronounced, you know. I read a lot of sci-fi, and there the computer actually controls everything. It decides when a human being is born, and when a human being ceases to be interesting or important for the society, and therefore it should be terminated. It recycles people. For example, AI stores the consciousness's matrix, and then it can reincarnate that mind when that kind of personality is again needed by the city life. And of course, this gives you the shrills and perhaps excitement to an extent, but also raises questions. And I have come across, especially in popular conversations, this kind of worries expressed by people, including believers, including Orthodox believers, that expect to be threatened by something that isn't yet there. What do you reckon?
Yes.
What's your take?
Oh, a lot to say here, of course. Thank you for asking this. Well, I think you mentioned the dystopian scenario, but if you look at how dystopia comes about, it usually is presented as utopia, so something that is good, and there's a slippery slope there. And my own conclusion by looking at the kind of discussion that were happening in this field were that everybody was preoccupied about this kind of AI that rebels against us, or well, that's more the sci-fi version. But what actually is the biggest danger in AI ethics, and there are millions poured into this research, is that we don't program AI correctly, and then it harms us by trying to do precisely what we tell it to do, just like the genie in a bottle, where it literally does what you ask it to do, or in the Greek king Midas story, where everything he touches turns to gold, and then everything around him, including his family, turns to gold. So this kind of let's be careful what we wish for with AI. But then the assumption was that if you do program it correctly, then there's a whole age of abundance coming, because this super intelligence will indeed be this ruler of our world. It would make decisions for us. It would take care of us. It will produce economic output, so we wouldn't have to work. We will be like we will all live leisurely lives and pursue our passions, just like cats today, for example, house cats. So we will be AI's pets, more or less. Well, that might sound very far away, but if you look at how we already delegate to algorithms many of our choices, willingly or unwillingly, sometimes indeed the algorithms are better suited to make split-second decisions on the stock market, landing an airplane, things like this. I mean, but there also you still have humans in the loop. But what happens on the internet and on social media is that you have algorithms constraining our choice space in a very non-explicit way. And you see, for example, if you allow algorithms to make suggestions and to suggest you YouTube videos or Spotify songs, I mean, that's convenient. You do that to a certain extent, but if you do that to a larger extent with all kinds of dimensions of your life, where you are becoming guided by this algorithm just because you know that they know better, because they are better informed, they have better data to rely upon, then my conclusion was that you are heading exactly in this direction of the dystopian AI ruler that nobody actually wants. So what we were trying in the Vatican document was to, well, let's see what is important about our humanity, what is important to preserve, what is important to emphasize when we are delegating more and more of our work and of our choices to algorithms. And that's also because there is this opportunity space now where some of the tech leaders are interested genuinely in creating good AI. Let's put it like that. I'm not discussing now the economic side of it, because of course it's always there are always financial interests when we're talking about corporations. But there are people who are genuinely interested to not do something bad in the world. They don't want to create the AI monster. And now, more recently, they are inviting spiritual leaders to also have a say, or to at least to listen to them. And our conclusion was, well, if Christians were invited to this conversation, and they are already happening at the level of Vatican, for example, we as Christians don't have it figured out very well. What is exactly that we want to preserve? What does the Christian tradition say about the human being and human being being an image of God and things like this? What are the most important features that we would like to protect, and that is important to have in all kinds of scenarios? So this was a very initial brainstorming. The document does not aim to give the final answer on this. A very large debate is needed for it. I'm not even sure it is possible to arrive at the same conclusion. We know, for example, that in Orthodoxy, many attempts to come to a shared formulation are futile, and these kind of meetings usually end up badly. So when we are talking about Christianity as a whole, it's such a diverse corpus that, but perhaps there are some things that when you talk about human autonomy, when you talk about relationality, vulnerability, things like this, maybe they resonate with many Christian traditions.
Yeah, and and these are very important concerns to express, and I would think personally that challenges, existential challenges, are good for us, regardless of how painful circumstances might be. We tend to express the ideal of flourishing, usually in terms of having social security, the security of life, the security of my old age, at least living in first world countries, the way we both live. We know all this. People are obsessed with securing their future, and well-being and flourishing become this kind of materialistic bonanza where they everything is done for them and to them, and they are beneficiaries, and they are entitled to receive all sorts of assistance. And I would assume that for places like this, developing AI that takes care of all my needs would be the utopia. But I would say that you mentioned hundreds of thousands and millions of years of human evolution. I would say that this lengthy history behind us, behind our species, has programmed us for a different kind of conquest of the El Dorado. Something that involves us actively, and it's not something that we receive. By the way, remember all those treasure quests, you know, whatever heroes we see in the movies and series and stuff like that, they consume their lives in order to find that treasure that will allow them to flourish. But I believe that the flourishing happens in the quest, during the quest, not when you get to it. And yes, I think this is a beautiful metaphor of what I'm trying to say here. I believe that if AI develops to such an extent that that can take care of aspects of life, we should also have some kind of balance between our own freedom and a certain degree of existential challenges that we have to deal with, and problems to sort out that will allow us to progress personally.
Yes, I agree, and I think this is exactly the entry point for Christian anthropology, because in a sense, if you hear this argument for the first time, that there's this world of abundance that waits for us, and it will solve world hunger, it will solve cancer, it will solve longevity, then it's at first it's hard to argue against such a vision, because it looks like you're anti-human if you don't want that. But then I think Christian anthropology has some things to say. I think philosophy also has some things to say. So you could find philosophical arguments for the value of the obstacle, for the value of suffering in human formation, in the maturation of the human person, and the value of vulnerability for relationships. But I think Christian anthropology it can be much more poignant on this, precisely because of our Christology, and precisely about the notion of the God that we think God is in a certain way, at least revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. So then we could draw a lot of conclusions from the person of Jesus Christ about what it means to be the perfect human, the image of God. What is the purpose of human life? What should we aim for? And of course, you look at Christ, there's not super intelligence there. I mean, it could be, but that's not the thing that strikes you out from the icon. There are other things that are more important about the person of Christ than his so-called rational intelligence. And it has to do with humility, it has to do with compassion, with love, with altruism. So in a sense, Christian anthropology is much better equipped to criticize such a hedonistic view of human life. And we know that human flourishing is not a process. It doesn't have that much to do with abundance of resources, but it has to do with a certain kind of overcoming character flaws and pursuing virtue, and actually gaining a superior kind of knowledge, whether you think that's transcendental and it comes through divine inspiration, or if you think about it as more the kind of wisdom that relates everything, so you see patterns in your own life and so on. But all these things are not achievable in the kind of life envisioned by the advocates of this transhumanism or artificial superintelligence. So that's why I think this is a fruitful place for Christian anthropology to step in and try to have a meaningful dialogue with this hypothesis.
And what would be your take to sort of wrap up this exciting conversation? What would be the ideal when it comes to an effective AI operating in the world, in a certain society, and say human dignity? Can we imagine a kind of balance that on the one hand makes life easy to an extent, especially where life isn't easy anyway, those places on earth where poverty is rampant, and sickness and the lack of means causes tremendous suffering to people, and personal development. Can we imagine a kind of balance there? Do you have an opinion on this?
Well, I have never been asked this question, I have to confess.
I'm an old guy. I ask questions.
I think it is a very difficult question, because indeed it is easy to criticize, but it is difficult to propose something else in its stead. And looking at my own choices in my life, I think that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And the same thing applies here. It looks to me that every choice that you make in this direction is a good one, because if you can save one more person, if you can add one more year of health to somebody's life, all these incremental steps are intrinsically good, or at least they look to us good. But then if you think add 10 years to somebody's life, okay, nice. Add 100 years, okay. Add 1,000 years, so add the age of the universe, whatever. So then when you get to really big numbers, or when you get to this kind of AI that solves everything for us, then suddenly you have some problems, and it's a gradual move towards that. And I don't know if somewhere along that line there is indeed a fine balance. What I think Christian theology could equip us with is very good criteria for discernment. So, for example, if you look at the human being as the image of God, that also implies a kind of responsibility towards creation, which means that you cannot completely delegate everything to algorithms and just sit on your couch and watch Netflix, because you have been called to existence by a personal God, and you have a mission. And besides your personal mission of discovery and relationship with God, there's also a mission to care for creation and to be, we can talk about spiritual priesthood here, or pursuing virtue. I think I don't exactly know how an equilibrium looks like, but I could think of the kind of criteria that a Christian could apply to all kinds of situations and choices, and try to discern whether this is a good thing or not good. For certain, I don't believe that a utilitarian view, which is just looking at numbers, so save as many numbers as possible, or now you have the extreme form of it, effective altruism and long-termism, like saving 10 billion people in the future is more valuable than saving 2 lives today. This kind of calculations, I don't think they lead you anywhere. Virtue ethics, on the other hand, I think is much better positioned to answer specific questions on in specific cases.
Thank you very much, Marius. This has been a pleasure and an exciting conversation. It's a great topic to tackle and think of. I'm very grateful and wish you all the best for Christmas and the new year. Crăciun fericit in our language.
Thank you very much, and I apologize if I have not been coherent at times. It's 10:15 p.m. here, so yes, this is not.
You've been very coherent, but I'm usually the I have the habit of complicating things and drawing people to on tangents that are not always expected or useful. So my apologies. But anyway, it has been great. It has been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the stimulating conversation.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.